Hello there, and good day to you. This is Brandon Tilt here, and you're tuned into Feather of Light. This is my podcast where I like to explore mental health related topics, sometimes introducing philosophy. I think rarely I'll have like a politically charged conversation, but try not to get too deep into those. And in general, I try to introduce my lens of spirituality whilst also, taking ownership that this is my view. These are my views. This is how I see the world, and I encourage you to reflect on what your beliefs are. And maybe stand behind those beliefs, right? Reinforce those beliefs. Get curious about those beliefs. Why do you have those beliefs? And how do you embody those beliefs? But anyway, today I'm coming here a little activated, but in a good way. I feel like I'm really leaning into my fire. One might say my masculine energy, my anger in ways, but not just trying to be, angry for sake of being angry. I feel like there's a necessary force that is anger, for asserting one's will, for making changes, for taking action, right? Recognizing that there's healthy, productive anger. And then there's also many ways anger isn't productive and doesn't actually go anywhere, and it can lead to disease when it lays dormant within one's system, and it contributes to tension and agitation and all sorts of uncomfortable issues. But no, so the topic is going to be about community accountability, and maybe just like touching on a little bit of my experience of, let's call them healers that hurt people, right? This isn't always about shamans, whereas I've talked about what in the Amazonian culture they call brujos, which, by the way, isn't always a bad thing. Brujos is also a more of a neutral term for magician in some cultures. But in the Amazonian tradition, from what I read about mestizo shamans, they refer to brujos as the ones who are manipulative, who control people, who are really just looking out for themselves and aren't actually trying to heal or support people in community. Now, it's not just about those brujos. It's about the types of healers that we might come across in our communities, and maybe people that aren't even necessarily in a healing role, but kind of like take on this spiritual identity, and then at the same time are harmful in the way that they show up in their, in their world, in their community, in their lives. And there's a lack of accountability or ownership around how they show up. So, I'm not sitting here directly calling people out. That's not really the point of this podcast. It's more of having sparking a dialogue around where these things show up in our lives and what ways we can navigate these pretty complicated situations from how I've experienced them. Right? I've experienced some of these situations in Ecuador in ways, sometimes it's like an after effect, like it's the story about there was this guy who came through this retreat, and oh boy, he was a problem. And he was taking advantage of women, usually, and asserting his dominance or his authority, or exploiting other men, and maybe just, being like a type of healer that doesn't necessarily support and create safety for people. And then when men try to talk with him about it, there's kind of a, how dare you? There's like a shaming element to it. So it's like a punisher. There's basically like two sides to this, let's call it a brujo, or some kind of facilitator who's got a different agenda, right? For women, he's probably very, very welcoming, right? He's very, very open to learning about them and getting to know them, getting very close to them, creating that safety. And then when they're in a vulnerable position, whether it's at the retreat or whether it's after the retreat, when they're integrating, kind of moving in and essentially becoming a sexual predator. And for men, it might be, well, becoming the buddy, becoming this idol in a way. And then at the same time, when anyone pushes up against them or offers them the type of feedback that they don't want to hear, anything that pushes or questions their authority in a way, or maybe in a sense exposes some of their behaviors and where there might need to be accountability, there is none, let's say in this case. And then punishing those men. It's like, oh, you're gonna tell me that I'm crossing lines? Well, you're the problem. It's like they're pointing the finger. So yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get curious about what do we do in these situations, right? What do we do when there's people who are healers and they don't have a strong ethical foundation, right? Like, I would say there's a lack of integrity, but at the same time, maybe there's a lack of training. Maybe there's a lack of awareness around what their role is as a healer. Or maybe no one's ever held them accountable and no one's ever told them that what they're doing is hurting people. And there's never been the necessity to increase their awareness and learn from their mistakes. So, I mean, as a community, I think many times we cancel these people. And in cases where there's extreme sexual violence or manipulation and extortion and maybe stealing and stuff, well, what choice do we have, right? We kind of have to protect the community. There is a pertinent need there for creating public safety. But at the same time, I've been trying to learn about how we can navigate these situations in a way that calls these people in to conversations about their behavior by means of holding them accountable, but not necessarily just like outcasting them. And there's reasons why, right? I mean, in some cases, maybe you just need to set that clear community boundary. There's a collective boundary that needs to be set. In other cases, maybe it's exposing, let's just call it a weak spot in the community foundation. Like maybe there's a let's call it a symptom of a larger problem, right? Maybe the community as a whole hasn't developed or matured in a way to know how to deal with these types of people. And when they come in, it's essentially exposing that the community has a collective weakness that needs to be remedied if that community is to grow stronger and be more unified and create more safety for everyone involved. And it can be difficult to discern exactly when one needs to set the boundary or when there needs to be a different type of intervention. And at the same time, not everybody can be that masculine or that feminine. It could be either, right? But in many cases, maybe it needs to be a man, especially if the man is preying on women. But the person, whoever they are, having the skill set and having the experience and having, I would say, the discipline, being able to enforce with discipline and respect, and really having the experience and training that I'm speaking to be able to rehabilitate or do a form of restorative justice. Yeah, so not easy to discern the when and what kind of intervention would be appropriate. Yeah, so sometimes it's not enough to just talk with these individuals and outright express to them what they're doing. And even if you're coming from a balanced place, even if you're coming from a respectful place, and you're letting them know that what they're doing is causing harm to others, and you're backing it up quite clearly with situations that they can remember. And it's not about memory, it's not about even in every case awareness. There's a genuine denial Like there's resistance, there's internal resistance, but there's a denial of taking ownership. And I've noticed this in a lot of different ways. I've noticed this in cases of men who cause sexual harm or have in the past and are trying to kind of rehabilitate in ways. And I've noticed this in more extreme cases where people hold space and they're space holders, they're facilitators, but they don't seem to have the same kind of ethical compass, and they kind of seem to deem their role differently than what it actually is. Like, if they're causing harm, it's not technically harm because they're not identifying with a role that has responsibility or has a public, let's just call it a public obligation to keep people safe. And then with some of these extreme examples of these shamans in the Amazon, it's like they don't care, or there is a general, they're prioritizing their sexual gratification, and it's almost like a game to them. I mean, I don't know the degree to which that's true, but it kind of appears that certain younger shamans that don't have the apprentice, they haven't gone through an apprenticeship, they haven't gone through the initiation with a master who would vet them through all these different stages of becoming an initiated shaman. They're kind of just going off of whatever impulses they have, and I just want to say it's probably a normal part of the, let's just call it the shamanic path, for someone to have to move through their sexual wounding in a pretty direct way, in a kind of aggressive way. In the mestizo shamanism books, Singing to the Plants, they talk about this, how when you're starting to engage with the plant spirit world, you're actually attracting certain, let's just call them entities, but let's just say you're doing certain dietas, but you're working with really dense, one might say aggressive energy. It's primal energy. It's making you feel all these different things and think all these different things. It's almost like you're prone to want to do things that are kind of extreme. And some might say they're things you shouldn't do, right? Like they're hurting people. But there's this ability to understand that these spirits in themselves, they're kind of neutral. They're not good or bad, but when they come through the human, when they're interacting with the human, when the human is channeling this type of energy, it has the potential to do harm. And the shaman needs to know how to counterbalance that with other types of energy, other types of spiritual practices, maybe even different diets. So there's a necessary polarization of some of these energies. And I would say for some of these individuals, whether they're a shaman or not, there's a lack of taking ownership for the need to polarize these energies, right? It's not, I'm not going to demonize the fact that men want to have sex with women. That's ridiculous, because like there's this primal drive, and in many cases there's intergenerational trauma that motivates that. But not being self-responsible, not taking ownership for the impact that has on other people, and then noticing how you can actually apply certain practices, whether it be therapy, whether it be various somatic practices, whether it be energetic healing, whether it be sexual alchemy, whether it be A, B, and C, like, working on yourself, doing the inner work. There's a way that, especially those who are in these vital facilitation roles, they're required to find a way to polarize that energy. And I'm not going to say that every form of like sociopathy is the result of someone just not doing their inner work, but I think in many cases it is, especially the versions that we see when we're out in these communities and something's kind of happening and something's off, and we're feeling wronged and we're not sure why, and I'm not going to pretend that like every situation that happens, that means that person's inevitably a bad person. I feel like each of us has to also construct a accurate narrative about who people are and how they show up in community, and then also reflect on what we can be responsible for, what we can take ownership for, so we're not just blaming other people for all our problems. However, when people act out, especially in these more deviant ways, it's only a matter of time before the community kind of takes note and starts to notice, right? Essentially the amount of people that they abuse or victimize starts to pile up, and people start to talk and people start to take note as a collective. They're like, okay, is there a disturbance here? What's going on? How many accounts can we look to and build a consensus on, right? And so this is something I've been exploring and understanding and trying to get familiar with, not looking for people to blame for my problems, but just acknowledging, okay, if there's a type of anger I'm experiencing, is it justified anger? Is there a situation where someone's actually causing harm, and me choosing not to speak in a way, trying to stay small, people please, not trying to rock the boat, is actually causing more harm, especially to a community where we, in a sense, have an obligation to inform each other, right? We have an obligation to actually have these conversations and do something, like take action, and have that lead to creating a safer community, right? So yeah, I've been humming and hawing about where I need to go and how I need to further learn, like where I need to go and what I need to learn to become more prepared to navigate these situations. And I do believe many of these situations just require experience. They just require being directly exposed to situations like this and navigating them and learning how your body responds, maybe just learning what to look out for, right? And many times it's, I won't say always, but many times it could be similar to therapy. You're looking for patterns. You're noticing, well, what's objectively a distortion and what might be just, someone's experience of something. And, we're all subjective. We all have our subjective lens about how we view someone and something, and we have our stories. But is there an experience outside of that story, right? Can we really see something objectively and speak to it objectively? And do we know how to peel back those layers so we're not just demonizing each individual that in some way triggers a wound within us? So getting better at that discernment, right? That level of precision within our discernment. But also maybe just getting more comfortable having uncomfortable conversations with other people in community, right? Having the openness to learn and understand others' perspectives and not dismiss or invalidate people's experiences. And at the same time, I think sometimes that can be a projection of the times where we've felt invalidated, right? If we felt invalidated in an experience we really need to be received in, it's not always the case, but it's most likely we're going to do that to other people because, well, it's just replaying that same loop. Maybe there's a part involved, right? Looking to IFS, oftentimes there's a part that's making it challenging for us to really see what's going on in other people's situations, and we jump to one extreme, or we see things through the lens of the part that was hurt in the past. So yeah, I'm feeling like I'm going to learn a lot about this from my travels, like my future travels. I've learned a little bit about it from my past travels, particularly from an experience I had in Mexico, which I won't get into details about here. But yeah, I've learned a lot about judging character, right? Really knowing that in some situations, people will pressure you to think differently or to experience something differently. They've got a really good act going on. And just knowing when it's appropriate to listen to people and to understand that what they're providing you is further informing you and basically that they're trustworthy, right? Or knowing when not to trust people, when seeing the good in people is actually naive, when you're actually causing a kind of harm, not just to the community, but to yourself, right? Like there's a form of self-abandonment that takes place when you're quick to dismiss or forgive other people without actually confronting them or essentially speaking your truth or advocating for your experience, and there being a degree of repair, right? Maybe there needs to be reconciliation. Maybe there needs to be action, right? But if you just jump right to forgiveness because it's too scary to confront someone, you're abandoning yourself. You're abandoning the parts of you that felt hurt and betrayed and invalidated. And man, that's tough, right? That's tough when we abandon ourselves. And I think many times in this life, we're forced to abandon ourselves in situations outside of our control. But if it is a situation in your control, if there is something that you can do about it, if there's a way that you can advocate for that part that's been invalidated, neglected, demeaned, or its anger has been dismissed, find a way to channel that into action. Find a way to take ownership for your outrage or your disgust or your resentment, the feelings that are there alongside the actionable anger. And at the same time, know how to return to a level-headed space. Know how to find your voice and where you can use your voice and how you can articulate your experience of something well, responsibly. And I feel like we're all able to inform each other. That's kind of just it, right? Like, this is about informing each other about life. This is about taking the wisdom, right? The teachings from these experiences, the good or the bad, and not becoming polarized from it, right? Not becoming wounded from it, but becoming informed and refining our discernment around people in our lives, the people that we want in our lives, the types of values that others embody, that we want to gravitate towards, that we feel can be a part of our community in a sort of close-knit way, maybe become part of our family, our soul family, right? Our chosen family. Maybe I'm a bit of an idealist, but I'd like to think we can build communities that embody what I'd consider to be integrity and the bare bones, the minimum of keeping people safe, right? And maybe I'll learn about that in Ecuador. Maybe I'll just learn more about what I'm trying to avoid. Who knows? I think I'll learn about both. And I don't know where I'll end up in 5 to 10 years, right? But it's not just about keeping me safe, whereas it is, right? It's not just about personal safety. It's about our children, right? It's about the people we care about, the people that are the most vulnerable, particularly children and elders. And we just have to really understand that when we have these conversations, it's not just for us, it's for those who are the most vulnerable, and it's to keep everybody safe. So yeah, this was a bit of a exploration space for me, an integration space for some of the stuff that I'm processing. But at the same time, this has been a relevant conversation that's been cycling back again and again and again. And it feels to me like I'm not the only one, right? If you're in this spiritual sphere, if you're doing the inner work and you're noticing your own patterns, your own bullshit, maybe you're not buying your own bullshit as much. And this is a bit comical, but once you're less prone to buy your own bullshit, you're not as likely to buy other people's bullshit. And this doesn't mean that you can read minds. This doesn't mean that you just with the snap of your fingers, you understand what's going on for people. Don't assume, right? Don't have a confirmation bias, right? But you start to understand where you can notice parts, and not just within your own experience, of course, but within other people. And it's just refining that discernment, getting better at noticing when something's off, being less naive and less quick to forgive, and understanding that this doesn't mean you're a mean person. This doesn't mean you're a mean person. Okay, if you need to hear that, because you're less likely to forgive people and you set strong boundaries and you hold people accountable, and maybe you speak more assertively, and some people get triggered by the things that you do, it doesn't mean you're a mean person. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. And yeah, there's something here about society thinking we need to all just be cozy, right? Like love and light, all just kind of like agreeable and harmonious all the time. And right, just having an unrealistic idea of what it means to be human. I think if we can be real, right? If we can speak practically for a minute, conflicts are going to happen, right? People are going to feel uncomfortable or even unsafe at times. And we can do everything and, everything we can. And some situations are just outside of our control and are chaotic, and bad things happen to good people, and people die, and wars happen, and the world is not just this sunshine and rainbows, bubbly sphere of happiness and do-gooders. Now, at the same time, I hold the very strong belief that people are inherently good, and we are all as a collective moving towards growth, progress, collective accountability, creating deeper, more heartfelt, compassionate relationships. Like, these are things I believe in, not just spouting off here. I believe these things exist, and I believe once we build them within ourselves, we are able to create those more actively. But at the same time, just as Carl Jung says that if one's roots are to reach the skies, if one's branches are to reach the skies, one's roots must grow down to hell. And we are living in this experience of the duality of things are going to get more beautiful, but on the same note, things are going to get a lot more chaotic and a lot more dark in ways. And it's not just, but many times it's how we deal with that, right? How do we deal with the reality that our world is spinning out of control at times? How do we deal with situations where, well, things are a bit dramatic, things are a bit confusing, things are a bit complicated? Many of these situations they're not outside of our scope of, understanding. They're just complicated, right? It's like a, telephone tag. Things get confusing, things get complicated. They require us to really sit with and maybe look at the mirror, right? Like if there's a mirror, another person's mirroring back to us a lesson about ourselves, can we sit with that lesson? Are we open to, what we need to take away from that situation to grow wiser? Yeah. So a lot of juiciness to this conversation. I don't want this to just be like a performance about this thing. I genuinely believe that we as humans are capable of having very uncomfortable conversations that embody leadership in a decentralized way. This isn't about one person on the top doing all the leader things and everybody else kind of just like falling in line. This is about each of us attuning to what I'd call self-energy, right? Courage, having courage, looking for clarity, looking deeper and attuning to our sense of compassion and thinking creatively, thinking expansively, and understanding that each of us is a leader in a community. Each of us has the capacity to co-create these communities. No one person should have to do everything and the rest of them can kind of just sit back and relax, right? But it takes work, right? It takes inner work. It takes having difficult conversations, like I've said for the sixth time, but it also takes action, right? It requires action. It requires us to maybe just plunge into something and try something new and be open to, all right, well, if this continues to harm people, in what ways can we as a community adapt to accommodate and not further worsen the problem? What I'm calling the problem, let's just call people that are more prone to exploit others. So it doesn't exacerbate the issue, it doesn't make it worse, but at the same time, we're creating the baseline, the minimum level of safety for the most vulnerable people. And we're collectively adhering to that. Yeah, I don't think I have the answer here. I don't think I'll ever have all the answers. But I'm looking to leadership that reflects change. I'm looking to identify with men or women that have the mentality of adapting to these situations, of embodying integrity in their everyday lives. It's not just about a performance. It's not just about when you're getting paid. It's literally just who you are on a deeper level, and are solution focused, and ultimately are courageous, right? Are strong, are willing to take action, are willing to take risks, and understand that we all need to step up, right? It's not just about the social justice warriors on the frontiers of the war zone. It's about each of us stepping up in our own unique way, based on what we know how to do, based on what we're capable of doing, and then having the courage to continually do that thing, right? So I appreciate you listening. I want to keep this relatively short here, and I'm back in my home studio with my microphone for the first time in probably 3 months. I've been doing a lot of guest interviews and self-reflections on the mountaintop. I'm interviewing spirit, right? I'm up on the mountain. I'm interviewing spirit. But yeah, this has been a nice little reintroduction to this space. And I appreciate you joining me, right? I appreciate you listening. And I hope you're able to take something away from this. Just reflect on your beliefs and keep healing. I believe in you. I believe in each individual and their innate capacity to heal. So as the indigenous say in the Halkomalem traditions of the Cilician peoples, Haichka is thank you. Haichka Osiam, thank you to our ancestors. And I say Haichka Skokwel Skoyus, which is thank you for the teachings. So Haichka Osiam, take care. Are you making space for your inner healer to blossom? Are you making space for that self, that deeper sense of self to shine through? If you'd be interested in working with me one-on-one, please reach out through featheroflightcounseling@outlook.com. Aside from that, go out to your favorite nature spot and pray for me, and I will pray for you. And a heartfelt thank you for being a friend. Take care.